be repercussions. Okay, Admiral Stavridis, we thank you for your time and your analysis. And we have some breaking news out of Mar-a-Lago. We want to pause for a special report.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Tom Yamas.
Moments ago, former President Donald Trump announced he will run again for president, officially kicking off his 2024 White House bid from his Mar-a-Lago compound in Florida. Here's a portion of what he said.
Tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. All of you. Thank you. Thank you. So many incredible friends and family here tonight. It's such a beautiful thing. Some people say, how do you speak before so many people all the time? When there's love in the room, it's really easy, if you want to know the truth. It really is. You ought to try it sometime. Together, we will be taking on the most corrupt forces and entrenched interests imaginable. Our country is in a horrible state. We're in grave trouble. This is not a task for a politician or a conventional candidate. This is a task for a great movement that embodies the courage, confidence, and the spirit of the American people. This is a movement. This is not for any one individual. This is a job for tens of millions of proud people working together from all across the land and from all walks of life, young and old, black and white, Hispanic and Asian, many of whom we have brought together for the very, very first time. If you look at the numbers, if you look at what's happened with Hispanic, with African American, with Asian, and just look at what's happening, this is a party that has become much bigger, much stronger, much more powerful, can do much more good for our country. This is a job for grandmothers and construction workers, firefighters, builders, teachers, doctors, and farmers who cannot stay quiet any longer. You can't stay quiet any longer. You're angry about what's happening to our country. Our country is being destroyed before your very eyes. It's a job for every aspiring young person and every hard-working parent, for every entrepreneur and underappreciated police officer who is ready to shout for safety in America. The police are being treated so badly. These are great people. They can straighten out the crime. They're the ones that know how to do it. We have to give them back their respect and their dignity. This will not be my campaign. This will be our campaign all together.
We're just listening to the former president there, Donald Trump, announcing his run for office 2024, trying to seek re-election one more time. It'll be his third presidential election. Among the issues he hit, inflation, border control, gas prices, crime, a lot of the same issues we heard from the GOP during these midterms. His campaign motto, if you will, America's comeback starts right now. Our NBC political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd, joins us now. Chuck, we've been watching the speech as it's still ongoing in full transparency. We're running a portion of the announcement because obviously the former president had a lot to say. Some things true, some things not so true. What is your take on the speech so far? We were noticing the energy levels and the tone of the speech.
The energy seemed down. Maybe it's too late at night. Being at 9 o'clock at night, he seems, dare I pick a phrase, low energy. He just doesn't seem... I mean, I think about him going down the escalator the first time he announced. There was bravado in his voice. He doesn't, it is not a happy warrior tone. It really is. There, you can hear some of the bitterness in here of losing the presidency and having to get it back. You could tell someone wrote him a speech that says, hey, make this about the movement. Don't make this about you. So he articulated that very directly. But You can tell when the words aren't his. We've covered him a long time.
Yeah.
You always know when it's him, and you always know when it's something that's
when he's going off the prompter.
when he's going on, and when he's just reading from the teleprompter. But what's interesting is he's announcing at a time when a whole bunch of people in the Republican Party are begging him not to announce. Some of them are just like, can you delay a month? Wait for Herschel Walker. He did do before he officially announced, he did do a gesture to Herschel Walker's campaign. But I can't help but think all these Republican senators that are upset that he's announcing today, they actually had the power to prevent this moment. They chose not to convict him at that second impeachment after the January 6th insurrection. So it is interesting to hear them complain about this moment when they actually had the power to do something about that might have prevented this moment from ever happening.
He went back and reviewed his 4 years in office, and he left out, I'd say about the last 3 or 4 months, he left out COVID raging, and he left out January 6th, completely left that out, and then pivoted to start attacking the current president.
He did, and he's also trying to blame another country for his election loss. He threw that out there, trying to start a conspiracy theory there, and he's trying to paint Biden as the warmonger. It's interesting. He's trying to say, hey, I'm not the one. He's trying to paint President Biden as that. It is interesting in talking with people around him, the way they're trying to make this seem better than it looks right now is, hey, he loves being the outsider, and if the establishment wants to attack, that's what they did in 2016, and it only made him stronger. What does fascinate me is he is intent on running an outsider campaign. He's going to go after the Republican Party almost as much as he goes after Joe Biden.
And with that, I want to bring in Hallie Jackson right now, an anchor here on NBC News Now, as well as MSNBC. Hallie, we met on the campaign trail in 2016, covering his first campaign. You followed him into the White House, and now 2024 starts today in 2022. I know you've been talking to Republican sources all over the party. The GOP, and I think Senator Ted Cruz really put it best. He said, if he's the nominee, I will support him. And I think that's the position a lot of Democratic, I should say Republican donors and Republican leaders are in right now.
Yeah, and Chuck knows this well. I was struck by his interview on Meet the Press on Sunday with Senator Bill Cassidy, who, by the way, is no Trump supporter, who wouldn't answer the question, right? If he is the nominee, would you support him? Let's be clear about what's happening tonight, Tom. I think it's important to lay this out because we've alluded to it, but you have now a former president whose actions inspired a violent insurrection at the Capitol as part of a push to illegitimately stay in power 2 years ago, the only president to have been impeached twice, making another run at the White House now, right? The third attempt to do this. He was successful in 2016, which is why you're seeing an interesting dynamic at play in this speech, I think. He is both simultaneously pointing to some of what he did in his 4 years in the White House, but also trying to time travel back to his winning campaign in 2016. I was told prior to the speech that there would be a lot of 2016 vibes in here. There are. He's being very explicit about it. It is not erasure of his time in office because he is still obviously citing what he did as president. He had sort of a head scratcher of a comment about how he went decades without war in his 4 years in office. Obviously, that's what he served. But he is both pointing to what he did in office, but also to before he actually made it into office. And Chuck is hitting on something important here. He will be running, and he wants to run, according to folks that I've talked with, an anti-Washington campaign, despite the fact that he was in Washington. He was the guy at the controls for 4 years, right, as the leader of the free world here. He also is trying to point to the scoreboard, to his grip on the Republican Party, because for years, right, ever since 2015, when he came down that golden escalator and a very different sort of vibe announcement, if you will, he has been able to point to the support of people in his base, right? The base that he created. You're seeing that moment there that we all remember so well, Tom. He is trying to point to that now by saying, hey, the Republican voters are with me. Because, yes, he will say, hey, the Republican establishment, they're not me. I've always fought against them. He'll point to Mitch McConnell. He'll point to the people that he isn't huge fans of inside the Republican Party, inside the Beltway. But he'll say the voters are with me, right? That has been his point all along. So when he cites the scoreboard in these midterm elections and says, hey, 200-plus people that I endorsed were backed by, you know, Trump-loyal voters, what he's leaving out are that the 20-plus people who lost, right, the smaller number of people who he endorsed who did not win, were the most important ones. They were the ones who were going to deliver control of the Senate to Republicans and who did not. They were the ones who would have, if they had gotten into these positions as top elections officials or governors in some of these key states, potentially helped to foment insecurity and election fraud conspiracies around a potential 2024 campaign. They didn't make it into office, right? So it is interesting to me that he's talking about the scoreboard in a way that leaves out what is one of the most important pieces of context. And you know who else is talking about the scoreboard today, Tom? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, in his first remarks responding to the attacks against him by former President Trump, ending his remarks by saying, well, you could say, look at the scoreboard on Tuesday. Ron DeSantis had a good night on election night, right? His state ended up red. The people he wanted to back ended up getting into office here. And I think as you're looking ahead to what is almost certainly going to be a contested primary here, that is going to be a dynamic at play. Can I just also say, you've also got people tonight trying to take advantage of this moment, and you might have seen it too. Governor Asa Hutchinson, for example, sort of cryptically tweeting, hey, as we're talking about 2024, I want to be a leader in the party as well. Like, you're going to start to see some of the floodgates open here for folks coming into the mix.
Yeah, we're going to have to wait and see what Republicans end up doing and what Governor Ron DeSantis does. I do want to bring in Kristen Welker, our chief White House correspondent. The Biden presidency, I don't know if it changes today, Kristen, but definitely President Biden will, over the next 2 years, will have to be answering questions about the former president, President Trump, and also probably responding to a lot of attacks that are going to be coming from Mar-a-Lago and wherever he takes his campaign.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. Look, advisors to the president are downplaying this announcement, one saying that former President Trump is irrelevant. But the Biden presidency changed right now. In fact, President Biden just tweeted out Donald Trump failed America with a list of different issues on which he is trying to make the case he failed America, on the economy, on protecting women's rights, and coddling extremists, according to President Biden and this tweet that he just sent out. So I think you're getting a preview of what we will see if, in fact, President Biden does throw his hat into the ring again. He said he intends to run. He's going to make a final decision in the new year, and he has stressed that his final decision will not be dependent on what former President Trump decides to do. But I think basically you're going to see a replay to some extent of the midterms messaging, Tom, that we saw. This contrast that the president is going to try to draw between himself and his predecessor on issues like, for example, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the DNC today, noting that it's the one-year anniversary of the passage of that, but also trying to make the case that former President Trump and Republicans who support him are extreme in a range of different issues, whether we are talking about the economy or abortion, things that we saw on the campaign trail. So I think that you've seen a preview of what we can expect in these coming months and over the next 2 years, if in fact President Biden does decide to run again. Now, there are some Democrats who are skeptical of a Biden presidency because of inflation, because of some of those issues. But at this point in time, you are already seeing the president ramp up his rhetoric.
Yeah, Kristen Welker with reporting that news about that tweet. With that, I do want to bring in our panel. Now, joining me is former Republican Congressman and NBC News political analyst Carlos Curbelo, and President Biden's first White House press secretary, now a host for MSNBC, Jen Psaki. I also want to bring Chuck into this conversation as well. Jen, I'm going to start with you. Some people at home may be thinking, why would President Biden, with everything that's going on with Ukraine, a possible missiles being shot from Russia, he's at the G8 summit over there in Bali, why would he tweet about President Trump? And me and Chuck were just talking here off camera, and it's pretty clear he wants to elevate him because it's good for Democrats that the former president is running again.
Well, I also think he wants to show Democrats in the country he's going to punch back, whether it's Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or whomever it may be. And let's be real, I mean, it takes about 30 seconds to send a tweet. So I think it was just an effort on their part to make that very clear to the public as they watched parts of the speech.
Carlos, how worried are Republican leaders? How worried are Republicans like yourself, moderates who were never part of the MAGA movement? Do they think that this is now going to be a long, drawn-out 2 years?
Yeah, there's a long list of Republicans, Tom, who asked the president or people close to him to please at least postpone this announcement until after the Georgia runoff, because everyone remembers what happened the last time there were runoffs in Georgia and the former president got involved. Now Donald Trump will be making headlines again, and Republicans have come to the realization that when Donald Trump makes headlines, when he's prominent in the news, that's typically bad for their candidates, especially in swing states and swing districts. So I think for now, you're going to see a lot of the 2024 hopefuls take a step back, hopefully let Donald Trump trip over himself. They don't want to get into the mud with him, but they won't be able to do that forever. At some point, Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, anyone else who's thinking about running is going to have to confront Donald Trump and all the things that he's going to be saying about them.
Chuck, I think with the former president's announcement that he's going to run, with the current president's tweet just now, 2024 has started tonight. With that, are there any other Democrats who have a case more than President Biden to say, I can take on Trump, I can beat Trump?
Not while Donald Trump's there. I think that is, as long as Donald Trump is essentially the face of the Republican Party, I think Joe Biden has more political capital inside the Democratic Party because, look, he pushed the democracy message when others in his party, including his chief rival from 2 years ago, Bernie Sanders, were questioning that decision. So I think he's got more capital inside this party than he's had even after he won the nomination the first time, I think, because of these midterms. So look, it's a different story if Trump goes away. Trump goes away, I think Biden suddenly does have to deal with people whispering and maybe thinking about it, but not right now. And I think, look, I think that they want to elevate Trump. Trump's good for Biden, and I also think they think Trump is good for the Democratic Party.
I want to put that question to Jen Psaki and also want to let our control room know if Garrett Haake, who's at Mar-a-Lago, who's at the speech, if he's available, I'd like to go to him as well. But the former president may still be talking. Jen, do you think that President Biden, when he was asked if he was going to run again, he said he thinks so, but he's going to make a final decision after the new year. Do you think he was waiting on former President Trump to see what he was going to do?
I think first he wants to talk to his family, his grandkids, his entire family. His granddaughter's getting married on Saturday. He's going to see them over Thanksgiving. There's no question, Tom, that Trump announcing is going to be front and center in his mind, even as he is managing the situation happening in Poland and overseas. That's why he ran in 2020 to begin with, right? He probably wouldn't have run otherwise if Trump had not been elected in 2016. So there's no question it's in his mind. It's probably the top of his list. I'm sure he'll be getting updates from aides, want those as well. And I think that's why that tweet went out. Yes, whether or not Trump is the right person to run against, for him to run against, that's debatable and I think an important thing to discuss, but he wants to show he's going to punch back if he runs and if Trump is the nominee.
Carlos, it's sort of interesting. The future of the Republican Party sort of starts tonight in the state of Florida. You felt the wrath of Donald Trump. You felt the wrath of the MAGA movement. But you also know Governor Ron DeSantis. Does Governor Ron DeSantis, in your opinion, have what it takes? Can he build the operation? Can he withstand the attacks? And I say this because in 2016, they said historically that was the greatest group of GOP candidates ever assembled for president, and Donald Trump knocked them all out. Does DeSantis have what it takes?
Well, Tom, let's just look at what Ron DeSantis has achieved. Just 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, he was a little-known member of Congress. He became governor of Florida, turned Florida red, at least for the foreseeable future, and today is perhaps the leading Republican candidate for president, if you believe some of the polls we've seen lately. So no one should underestimate Ron DeSantis. He's been very astute in the way he has used the Trump movement to grow, and now it appears that he is completely off the Trump train and ready to take on his former mentor. So Ron DeSantis has the same ambition and the same amount of ego Donald Trump has, so he will be a formidable opponent.
Carlos, Jen, Hallie, Kristen, Chuck Todd, I thank you all for being with us tonight. That concludes our special report. I'm Tom Yamas in New York. Top story. We'll be right back.
As we look out over the latest city